Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome to another day of Vlogmas. Is it weird to upload a video on Christmas Day? Probably, but Merry Christmas! If you as a viewer are anything like me, you'll probably be watching this at least 2 weeks into January because my watch later playlist is ridiculous. I'm still watching videos from the end of November. Today I want to do another weekly reading wrap up, except this week I actually did finish a book. Last week I just kind of did an update on where I was with reading Blood Marked by Tracy Deonn and My Policeman by Bethan Roberts, and this week I did actually finish My Policeman by Bethan Roberts, which I talked about in yesterday's video as well, but I didn't actually give my thoughts on it. The premise of this story is it is in 1950s Brighton that Marion first captures sight of the handsome and enigmatic Tom. He teaches her to swim in the shadow of the pier and Marion is smitten, determined her love will be enough for them both. A few years later in Brighton Museum, Patrick meets Tom. Patrick is besotted with the younger man and opens his eyes to a glamorous, sophisticated new world. Tom is their policeman, and in this age it is safer for him to marry Marion. The two lovers must share him until one of them breaks and 3 lives are destroyed. Essentially, it's an LGBTQ+ book set in a time where being LGBTQ+ was literally illegal, and it's about the 3 people involved in this relationship. I found it incredibly poignant. It was told in a dual perspective, but from the perspectives of each of the lovers. So Marion is writing essentially like a letter to Patrick, Tom's lover, and she uses a second person narrative because she is addressing Patrick directly, which I thought was a really interesting writing style tool. And then Patrick is writing a journal in current times, so Marion is writing from the 90s about her experience in the 50s, whereas Patrick is writing in real time, for want of a better word. The ending was incredibly poignant. It's left kind of open-ended, but also you kind of have an idea of where it's going to go, but the fact that there's no confirmation, I found that really poignant. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to spoil it, but I found the ending incredibly poignant, and I think at first I found it frustrating, but the more I think about it, the more it makes perfect sense. I think giving it too much of a conclusion would make the story feel too raw and too hard, but this just makes it feel soft and sweet. It kind of puts all of the characters where they need to be, if that makes sense. I thought Marion was an incredibly well written character. I thought Patrick and Tom each had their moments. I actually disliked Tom more than I thought I would. The position he puts each of the characters in is quite hard, even for the scenario. I don't think Tom's the greatest of characters, but I don't mean that he's not a well-written character. I think that everyone was incredibly well fleshed out, but I don't think Tom was the most likeable, which is ironic because he's a love interest from 2 perspectives. But I rated this 4 stars in the end. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and it was another one that was from the wedding library that I probably wouldn't have picked up if it weren't for the fact someone gave this to us as a wedding gift. And I'm intrigued to watch the film. In terms of the other books I'm reading, I believe I was on 36% of Blood Marked in last week's reading wrap up, and I'm now at 44%, so I've not read a ton more. I don't think I really have anything more to say on Blood Marked at this point, but I am still enjoying it more than I enjoyed Legendborn. There's much more actual story to sink your teeth into, and I think the pacing is a lot better. If I'd gone into reading Legendborn knowing that it was very much set up for a longer series of books, I think I would have enjoyed it more, because I was expecting it to be high-paced, exciting fantasy when actually it was a lot of setup. I think a lot of reading and rating books is about where your expectations are before you go into them. I think it's often the case that books that you have no expectations for are the ones that you end up enjoying more, because if you have super high expectations, the book has to work really hard to meet them. And the physical book that I've started reading since I finished My Policeman is Second Chances in Newport Stephen by TJ Alexander. I don't have the actual copy to hand, but I do have the dust jacket, so there's that. I'm literally only 60 pages in. How much is that percentage wise? 20% of the way in, because I only started it a few days ago. In the 20% I have read, the 2 main characters are quite well set up. I think if we're talking about romance tropes, it's childhood friends to lovers to strangers to friends to lovers. I think, because when they were kids they were best friends, then they were in a relationship and they had all their firsts together, and then for some reason they lost contact, which is not something that I'm aware of as the reader as of yet. But now they've kind of got back in touch, they're in the same town again, and they're getting to know each other, building that friendship again, and they're both thinking romantic thoughts. I don't think it's spoilery for me to say that they're into each other because it's a romance book and it's fairly obvious. But I don't think I've ever read a book with a trans main character before, so there's a lot of really interesting discussions about being trans, and there's a point that I've actually tabbed where Nick and Eli, the two main characters, are out kayaking with Nick's daughter who's only 4, and Eli makes a throwaway comment about how they got in trouble once when they were kids at a camp, and the camp counsellor then split up girls and boys so that they couldn't get into trouble anymore, and the little girl Zoe is confused because they're both boys to her and she doesn't know the context of Eli's life, and Eli kind of panics and throws it to Nick to explain the concept of trans to a 4-year-old, and he explains it in a really well written way. It really kind of opens your eyes to how easy it is to help kids accept things they're not familiar with. I'm interested to see where the rest of it goes, because it's been very fast paced and they're falling hard and fast to each other, but like I say, I'm only 20% in, so what's going to happen in the remaining 80% of the book? So I don't think I'm going to get to reading any more of my Christmas reads this year, and starting a Christmas book after Christmas Day feels weird, so I definitely need to start reading them earlier next year so I can actually fit more of them in. I'm hoping to get lots of reading time in over the next few days, kind of in that lull between Christmas and New Year. So whilst I'm currently on 3 of 8 books finished for my monthly TBR, Second Chances in Newport Stephen will hopefully be book 4, then I've got Bloodmarked on the go, which is book 5, and then I've just got 2 Kindle Unlimited books to read and my Illumicrate book for the month, which is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Will I get through essentially 5 more books in the next week to make the end of the month? Realistically, no, but we're going to try our best and that's all we can do. I need to start thinking about my January TBR. I think making bookish content comes with a lot of like end of the month content, so like doing monthly wrap-ups and setting monthly TBRs and all those kinds of things. But then if you pair the end of the year with that, there's also looking back at the whole of 2023 and looking forward into 2024, and you know, wrapping up and setting goals and all of those things as well. So there's loads of bookish content to come, so I hope you're looking forward to that, because I have no shortage of things to say about books and the books I'm reading and the books I want to read. So I hope you'll stick around for it. I hope you have had or are having a fantastic Christmas, and I'll see you tomorrow for another Vlogmas video. Bye!